Now let's bring in Jason Hauser. He's the former chief of staff of ICE and Customs and Border Patrol counterterrorism official. I want to get your reaction to what we've seen there in Minneapolis.
Yeah, thanks for having me. What I saw, I know there's a lot of sort of adjudicating this event in the social media and the public, but when you step back and you sort of look at this event, you see a chaotic situation. I know what Chief Bavino has said over the last 24 hours or so about this being an operation focused on criminal that was in that community. The sort of operation itself then needs to be assessed, because coming in with sort of that armored vehicle and the sort of the size and scale and scope, typically going after convicted criminals, that would not have been the case. There would have been more surveillance and focused targeting of an individual that may be a public safety threat. But what I saw on the ground there is a lot of fear within the community. You see chaos, and all of those things mixed with uncertainty, both between what the expectation is for federal law enforcement at the moment from the public's view, but also the expectation between federal law enforcement agencies. We have clearly Border Patrol is now becoming an interior immigration enforcement agency. And there needs to be a great deal of transparency, not only on this investigation, which needs to be unbiased and needs to be multi-pronged and have a large-scale review, but we also need to assess now what is Border Patrol's way in which they're going to carry out their use of force and how they will interact with other law enforcement agencies. You can imagine a situation there on the ground where there was not, I mean, clearly there was 9 to 10 to a dozen Border Patrol officers that did not use lethal force and one that did. Assessing that sort of decision making in that specific moment needs to be assessed, but the overall way in which that these operations are being carried out, are they in the public safety interest? Are they being carried out legally under legal authorities with probable cause? Are agents using sort of response tactics that are proportional to the threats they're seeing on the ground? And is there other ways that law enforcement can go carrying out these duties, protecting our communities and sort of executing sort of removal operations in a humane, just way, instead of in this manner that incites chaos and promotes protests and violence? This is not the way. We all know very clearly that the public, we have had an immigration system that has been broken. But now we have operations that seem to be just as broken. And we have to step back from this moment.
Now, Jason, we just heard from a Minnesota state senator calling for ICE to leave Minneapolis. How are federal agents typically trained to work with local law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and one specifically about how they're also trained to in the use of force policy within their handbooks and their training. You know, Clearly that has changed. And what we're seeing on the ground to your question is a breakdown in cooperation and coordination and communication with not only state and local law enforcement, with immigration enforcement agencies, but also federal law enforcement as a whole. How is the FBI and DEA and ATF that are now involved in civil immigration enforcement, are they training with CBP and ICE officers to carry out these sort of enforcement operations? All of those things need to be questioned, and we need answers, because we need to not only put the public in to look out for the safety of the public, but also to look out for the safety of the officers themselves, because they have been directed to carry out what we see are quota arrests, going after non-criminals, and sort of doing these on street operations. Are they being given the best training and capabilities, and sort of what procedures are they following that are unified across agencies? All those things need to be questioned.
So the question at hand right now is, what could help de-escalate tensions right now?
We need to get back to the place where we have to begin to start rebuilding trust. And under the current operations and focus of a lot of political appointees, I don't see where that's going to happen in the near term. We have to move towards enforcement operations that are humane, that are targeted on those that have final orders of removal and can be humanely removed. And we also need ICE and all of federal law enforcement to get back to the mission of prioritizing those that are public safety and national security threats. And when you have that, the trust will be rebuilt with state and local law enforcement, and we can get back to having a conversation about state and local law enforcement supporting immigration enforcement agencies, focusing on those that are convicted criminals, that are drug traffickers and human smugglers. we have to focus on those threats. But it is going to take a long period of time for us to get back to that point.
All right, Jason Hauser, thank you for your analysis.